Oh, that's a good one. Modify Arc is asking Syra, what is the most frustrating thing dealing with getting the pre-release working on Linux?
Oh man, so since we're doing a really unorthodox architecture where the render is running in like one Proton while like the main engine is running natively, I found that there's not actually a lot of like support for communicating like between a native Linux process and a wine process. Like most people like on the internet, they're like, well, why don't you just use TCP? Just use a pipe, just use a local socket or something. And I'm just like, no, we need shared memory. And so I was like, okay, well, I could just point it at dev SHM, which is where all the shared memory stuff is. But then that was also kind of janky, and then the semaphores didn't work, which means that like each side couldn't tell the other side that there was a message. They just kind of had to keep polling for if there was a message. So I just made like a little wrapper. But I suppose the most frustrating part, to get back on track, is managing like the startup sequence of Resonite in that configuration. Because what we have to do is we have to publish the game as if it was a Windows only game. And then when it launches, it will detect if it's running in Wine, aka Proton. Proton is just a modified version of Wine. And change the startup sequence accordingly. So we have a little bootstrapper program that I wrote, which will launch in the place of the main exe. Then what it'll do is it'll detect if it's running in Wine, and if it is, it will launch a shell script. And that launches as like a native Linux thing, because when you launch a shell script from within Wine, it'll actually spawn, like there's a mechanism to have it spawn an actual instance of like bash or sh or whatever you're using for your shell, and do like normal Linux stuff with the shell script. So what that does is it downloads a native version of .NET for Resonite to use, and then launches Resonite using that version of .NET that it just downloaded. Then Resonite will detect if it's running under Linux and assume that it will want to launch, it will want to launch the shell script for Renderite, which is the renderer, which then writes, it's a little janky, which then writes the launch arguments to a file, which the bootstrapper then picks up and spawns the actual Renderite exe with those launch arguments, so that the bootstrapper, having been launched in Proton originally with all of the correct environment variables set up, will create a child process that also has the correct environment set up, aka the renderer. It is a big old merry-go-round that is crucial in making this configuration work.
It's pretty cool, like you figured it all out though, because like I think this is gonna help like Resonite run like a lot better on Linux. Like just like with the main process being native, it kind of simplifies a few things too. But also I think it like makes us like from at least technological standpoint, it makes us like probably the first platform or application to use this kind of hybrid architecture where like the one program has like is like literally a hybrid of native Linux and Proton for the other part of it. And I don't think there's like I think there's a good chance like we're gonna be like the first to like do this kind of architecture, and I think that's kind of cool. So I'm glad like you kind of managed to get it working.
Yeah, it's very unique.
If somebody asks us like if Resonite runs natively on Linux, we'll be like yes and
yes, no.
Yes, no.